Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter, and today we are turning Sybill Trelawny from this to this. She looks amazing. I've dreaded painting her for quite some time because of the orb. I wanted it to look great, so I did some research, and I'm gonna show you how I did it. First, I base coated this model with a light gray primer. It's pre-based, so nothing to worry about that. And let's start with the easy stuff. So first the face, Buckman's Glow as a base tone. Face, hands, basically that's all the skin this model has. She's also wearing glasses, which will be challenging, especially for the eyes, but we'll get to that later. Kislev Flesh I used as a next highlight. What I did here is paint the areas that I want to stand out the most and then thin it down with some water and go over the rest of the area to blend it all together. I used some Carbro Crimson as a shade and I thinned that down just a little bit. You don't want it to be too red, but it gives a nice natural shade to the skin. You can also use Rykland Flesh shade if you want. Next, I'm giving the eyes a go with Palette Witch Flesh. I wanted her eyes to be quite wide because she's wearing these huge glasses that enlarge her eyes quite a lot, so I wanted them to stand out really much. So I tried painting the eyes as big as possible. I wanted to give her green eyes, just to be a bit different than the standard black, so for that I used Warboss Green. It's a nice and bright green. You can use any bright green you want, or just go for black. Now the glasses itself, I painted with Abaddon Black. I think in the movie they are more like dark brown, but with these tiny details you want them to be very well visible and not blend too much with the skin tone. So I avoided the browns and went for the black here. This is so incredibly difficult because you do not want to touch the skin, you want to have a clear line for the glasses, so take your time on this one. Next I wanted to go for the orange look, the orange hair here, and for that I used Jacaro Orange as a base tone, which is quite bright, maybe too bright, but we're getting there, trust me. You can start darker if you want, but I went for this, and then I used a shade made of Doomble Brown, mixed with some water, or with some Lamia Medium if you want. The next highlight, I'm dry brushing Towelite Ochre onto this. I used a fairly large dry brush, wipe off most of the paint as you would normally do with dry brushing, so to keep that orangey look below. Next I'm brightening it up a little bit more by adding a Shabti Bone to the Towelite Ochre, and go over it again, but mainly focus on the top areas, the parts which would catch the most light. And to make it a bit more yellow, I'm using Zamazi Desert as a final extra color. It kind of blends the previous colors together and makes it a bit more blonde, so I think it looks pretty good. Next is the bandana. As you can see here on the picture, it's a mixture of green and orangey red with some markings, and for that I used Jacaro Orange again, and for the green part Wag Flesh. It's not really into focus, but you get the idea. I mixed the green and green, so I made several parts to it. And for the pattern, I'm using a fine detail brush and some green camo to add some horizontal or vertical lines onto the bandana. It's a great detail, and it just gives it a little bit more extra. Then on to the main Dress, Caliban Green as a base tone. It's quite a large area. And I want to start off nice and dark. Make sure to get those areas below the hand and along the collar, as you can see here. Next, I'm mixing some Warboss Green into the Caliban Green for our first highlight stage. Leave some of the darker areas where they are and focus on the raised areas, top of the folds, etc. I keep adding Warboss Green to the mix to brighten it up. In the end, you have about 3 parts Warboss Green to 1 part Caliban Green, I think. Now for the fringes below, just hold your brush sideways and you can add some nice highlights there. And to top it off, I'm using some Elysian Green. It's a bit more yellowy, which is a natural flow to the green and gives a nice bright detail. It's always smart to water your paint down, especially when you're doing the folds to blend the colors together. When you're doing the fringes like this and hold your brush sideways, make sure it's not too thin. Now as for the dress, you can see here it has 3 different colors, green, yellow, and sort of a white pinkish. And for the green, I'm using Wag Flesh again. Just focus on maybe the top half of the dress. For the yellow, I'm using Zamazi Desert. And I'm painting about 1/4 of the dress. So half green, quarter yellow, quarter pinkish. The trouble here is to keep a straight line and have it evenly spread around the dress. Now for the pinky white part, I'm using Flayed One Flesh because it has some yellow and some pink all combined and it gives that nice look. And now to make the dress more interesting, we're going to add a ton of details. First, in the green, I'm using Ogreen Camo again and adding some curls and dots here and there just to make it a random pattern all around the bottom part of the dress, the green part. By adding these details, it looks so much more interesting. Just add some curls, like a C-shaped thing, add some dots here and there. This is quite time consuming, but the result is really, really worth it. Now for the bottom part, I'm using Emperor's Children or any kind of pink you have to add some dots. It looks like a tiny flower pattern, I think, in the movie, in the original screens, but I'm going for something similar. And this is also quite time consuming, but it looks beautiful. I'm shading the folds with a very watered down version of Null Oil, just to create some darker areas. You don't want any full parts of Null Oil because it's way too dark. Then the main coat or vest, what is it? For that I'm mixing Abaddon Black with Warbearer's Red to get a nice dark red look. And we're going to be highlighting that further on. I also painted the shoes in the same mixture. Then some pure Wordbearer's Red as a first highlight stage. You can cover quite a lot, but especially in the arms, the sleeves, leave the darker recesses dark because it gives that extra detail. And focus on the top parts. Leave those recesses alone. you get a very nice result. But we're gonna take it a little bit further, and for that we're using Bugman's Glow. It's a really nice addition to this kind of red, and for this just focus on the details, the fringes on the bottom and the top part of the vest, which would normally be the brightest part, as the light would hit there first. Again, when you're doing the larger areas, the folds, water it down. Next, the, what is it, pants? Sons of Horus green for that. It has a lot of details in there, it's very wrinkled. We're going to use those wrinkles by shading it with Kulia, is it Kulia? Kulia green shade? I don't know how to pronounce this. And this gives it an instant nice dark and bright look. No need to take it any further, but you can do it of course if you want. Then Lead Belcher for the tiny metal details. There's a chain hanging around her neck. There's some bands around her arm. Her right arm has a couple of them, and the left arm has some beads which I also painted with Lead Belcher. And now for the final part. The orb. I've waited to do this until the very last. I started by painting it with white Scar. Thin down that paint because it tends to get a bit blotchy, and make sure that it's nice and bright. This is the starting point. Now what we're going to do here is use a wet blending technique. So make sure to have clean water at your side. And if you have two brushes, one damp one and one with paint. Now as you can see here, I'm covering the orb with water. So make sure that the paint has dried, of course, before. Make that orb nice and damp. And then add some Mechanicus Standard Gray to the top. I'm going for a dark top and a bright bottom. And because we've wetted it before, it kind of blends together. And it doesn't have any hard lines. So it's like a blurry look, which I like. Next, Tectless Blue or any kind of bright blue. I'm going for a blue globe or an orb. And I'm using the same technique. Painting the top, and use my wet brush, the clean brush, to kind of wipe the paint off the bottom. You can see me doing here. I'm removing the paint in the bottom so that remains nice and white, bright. You can see the Mechanicus Standard Gray shining through. Now I'm holding it upside down because of course wet paints, thin down paint, goes down. And you want it to be the darkest in the top, so hold it like this for a couple of seconds. We're darkening it up a little bit more with some contour blue. You can see a beautiful effect coming as we go. I'm using the same technique. Hold my brush sideways like this to remove any excess paint and kind of blend those colors together. Make sure to keep it nice and damp and wait for it to dry in between. I'm adding some reflections here with white Scar. For that I'm putting in 2 dots of white paint on one side and doing it again on another side. You can go maybe 3 sides if you want. And the double dot gives it the idea of a reflection. I'm putting one over here as well. Next, with white Scar, I'm using the same technique as we did before with the blue, but now upside down. So we're going to brighten it from the bottom upwards. Also by making it very moist and blending those colors together. And then to give it a nice shiny look, I'm using Art Coach, which is a technical paint and gives it a beautiful glow. Then all that's left is the base, Steel Legion Drab. And I'm mixing it with some Caliban Green while wet. So make sure to go over it a couple of times because I want it to be quite dark and it's way too bright now. As you can see here, I darkened down quite a lot, and now I'm using Agrex Earthshade for all the cracks in the stones. Give them a nice dark look. And it also darkens down the green we painted before. These bases tend to be quite boring, so I would like to use some colors to make them a little bit more interesting. Finally, some Baneblade Brown to create some nice edge highlights here and there. And that's it for Sybill Trelawny. Look at that beautiful orb. I'm really satisfied with how that turned out. This was my first go at an orb, and I'm really satisfied with the result. I hope you have something similar, or at least you have something that you're satisfied with. This was a lot of fun to paint. I hope it was of any use to you, and if it is, please consider subscribing to the channel and like this video, and please leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. I hope to see you in one of my next videos, and until then, bye bye.